Millions of people will walk through those doors every day, paying on average $5 for a single cup of coffee, making Starbucks one of the most expensive mainstream chains. For comparison, the average cup of coffee at a local cafe in the US costs about $3.52, which is why every single day, millions of cups are sold to millions of people, but not to the farmers who grow it. Because in places like Guatemala, many of the small farmers who cultivate the very coffee beans that end up in your Starbucks cups couldn't afford to walk into a Starbucks and buy one themselves. Think about that. That's like a baker that couldn't afford the same massive wedding cake they made for a newlywed couple, or a luxury car manufacturer not being able to buy that Ferrari. But think about this, we're talking about coffee. Simple, delicious, and relatively cheap. But if it's so simple and cheap, why can't the makers of it afford to go every day and buy a cup for themselves? Well, the people who spend millions of months planting, harvesting, and processing the coffee that fuels one of the world's biggest coffee companies often can't afford the finished product made from their own beans. So how is this possible? Well, coffee's long journey is breathtaking. It takes the route of a seasoned traveler. It flies from the mountains of Guatemala to the noise-riddled city streets of New York, the historic and damp cobblestones of London, and even to the neon-lit labyrinths of Tokyo. But the cultivator of that seed, the artist and master, they travel from their home to the plantation day in and day out to make sure that you get your morning brew. So it begs the question, why pay them so little? Well, to answer that, we need to follow the money behind one of the world's most iconic cups of coffee. And to do that, we need to know about
Hank?
Starbucks double shot espresso drink. Bring on the day.
To be able to understand this paradox, we're going to need to understand Starbucks and what it is as a company. Because this isn't just a coffee shop, it's one of the largest coffee companies ever built. Spanning from busy city centers to quiet suburban neighborhoods, Starbucks has become almost impossible to avoid. With more than 41,000 stores across the globe, that green mermaid logo has become one of the most recognizable logos on Earth, which is why many people are already waiting in line earlier in the morning than you even wake up. Some stop in for a quick espresso before catching their train. Others spend hours working from a corner table with a laptop. And for a lot of people, it's more than just a coffee shop. It's their daily routine. It's a place for them to work, to read, and maybe even a place for them to take a quick break from the chaos of their daily lives. But it's a life outside and far away from the humble origins of the coffee bean, because behind every latte, cappuccino, and cold brew is a supply chain that stretches thousands of miles across continents. Because coffee doesn't grow in New York, it doesn't grow in London, and as you probably know, it doesn't grow inside a Starbucks cafe. Every bean begins its journey somewhere else. High in the mountains of countries like Colombia or Ethiopia, millions of coffee cherries are picked by hand before they even reach a roasting facility. And long before a barista writes your name on the cup, someone else has already spent months growing what's inside. And among those countries, Guatemala occupies a special place, and that's because its volcanic soil, its high elevations, and an ideal climate produces some of the world's most sought-after Arabica coffee. For generations, coffee has been more than just a crop. It is one of the country's most important exports and ultimately cemented in their own culture. And despite producing coffee that's sold at premium prices around the world, many of the small farmers responsible for growing it earn only a tiny fraction of the value created after the beans leave the farm. And that's where the story really begins. Coffee farming isn't easy. For many Guatemalans, coffee isn't just a crop or a drink. It's their livelihood. Most of the coffee grown here in Guatemala is Arabica, a variety known for its high quality and rich flavor. But growing high quality coffee takes both time and patience. During that time, farmers care and tend for these trees. They have to protect them from disease and hope that unpredictable weather doesn't ruin the months or even years of work. And even after the harvest season finishes, the farmers still have a lot more work to finish up the process because, unlike most crops that can be harvested by machine, high-quality Arabica coffee is usually picked by hand. Workers spend hours walking up on the steep mountain terrain, selecting only the ripest coffee cherries one at a time. And if that doesn't seem like enough of a hard time to you, if the cherries are picked too early or too late, it can affect the quality of the final product, leaving you with wasted time. And after the coffee cherries are picked, they have many more steps before they're able to be sold. They have to be sorted, then they have to have the fruit removed, the beans are then washed and later fermented. After that, they dry them, they mill them, grade them, and finish them off by bagging them to be exported.
What kind of place is this?
This results in that coffee that you take less than 20 minutes to drink to take months to be fully prepared and ready to reach your cup. But despite all that labor, the vast majority of coffee farmers typically capture only a minuscule amount of the final value. That being that on average, the Starbucks Corporation pays coffee farmers an average of $1.50 per pound of coffee beans that they receive. But also, coffee prices do tend to fluctuate constantly depending on the quality, the market conditions, and even the sourcing agreements, which leaves some farmers with more and some receiving less. But something you'll start to notice when we look into the full picture of how much it actually takes to make a full cup of coffee is that it'll leave you thinking, what if? The question, what if, starts to come towards the end. So let's start with a hypothetical. Imagine Starbucks purchases a pound of coffee from a local farmer for $1.50. The coffee is then shipped around the world to be roasted, packaged, and distributed to thousands of Starbucks locations. Once it arrives at a cafe, that single pound of coffee is used to make espresso drinks. And typically an espresso shot uses around 7 grams of coffee, meaning that 1 pound can produce roughly 60 to 65 espresso shots. But some estimates are higher depending on the roast, the extraction method, and the type of drink. But we'll use 64 shots for this example. Now, let's say that each drink that's sold there sells for an average of $5. That's roughly $325 of revenue from sales from a pound that only cost them $1.50 originally. That might sound unbelievable or completely unfair at first, but before you start thinking that Starbucks is making hundreds of dollars in profit from every pound of coffee, there's much more to that story. Because the reality is that the coffee bean itself is only a small portion of the total cost. Because for every drink that Starbucks sells, it also has to pay for the milk, which can cost 30 to 70 cents depending on the drink, the paper cup and plastic lid, which together costs around 15 to 25 cents, syrup, sauces, and flavors, adding anywhere from 10 cents to 50 cents, labor, including the barista preparing the drink, which is different everywhere around the world. But for this example, let's use the US average of $15 per hour. Also, you have to take into account rent, which for some Starbucks locations tends to be tens of thousands of dollars every month. Utilities like electricity and water, espresso machines that cost thousands of dollars each, as well as any other machine at their disposal. In addition to all that, they also have to pay for transportation of all the products, warehousing, roasting, and packaging. And of course, not to forget marketing, technology, corporate staff, and taxes. And when you add all of those expenses together, the actual profit for a single cup of coffee is far smaller than the selling price might suggest, with an overall profit from that $5 cup at the store being about 64 to 77% of the overall price. But once you incorporate the actual corporate expenses, then the profit goes down all the way to 11 to 14%. But the interesting part, which would probably be the best way to put it, is that of all the money that goes into these expenses, only a small slice of that comes from the actual coffee beans, with only about 2 cents of each $5 cup of coffee coming from all the hard work that the farmers put into growing and selling their coffee beans. And that, sadly, is the reality of the modern coffee industry. The greatest asset to the coffee conglomerate that is Starbucks isn't its greatest value, because the greatest value isn't created on the farm. It's created everywhere else after the coffee leaves its original home. But what if it wasn't? And so with all that being said, if Starbucks coffee is more than just a cup of coffee itself, why not make everyone wealthy from it? Why aren't the small farmers of the world given a greater cut of the pie? Why aren't they contracted directly by Starbucks to guarantee a good wage and that their jobs are safe? Well, the thing is that it wouldn't make much sense for a company the size of Starbucks to do that and lower their net profit at the same time. But they are out there to help out struggling farmers, and here's just a few ways. First, by farmer support centers. Starbucks operates farmer support centers in coffee growing regions where experts provide free training on improving coffee quality, increasing crop yields, and using sustainable farming methods. Secondly, climate resilient coffee. The company invests in research to develop coffee trees that are more resilient to disease and climate change. Starbucks also distributes these trees to farmers to help them protect their future harvests, and they also give them financial support. Starbucks help provide access to loans and other financial resources so farmers can invest in their farms, equipment, and long-term improvements. And lastly, by community investment. The company supports coffee growing communities by investing in education, education, local development projects, and programs that improve the well-being of the farming families. But after hearing all of these things, we still have the question hovering, is that enough? Of course, a farmer would appreciate all of that kind of help to be sure that they would produce a greater yield of crops every year. But with a better yield, why not have them be paid more? If only 2 cents from a cup of coffee only comes from those coffee beans, what if Starbucks were able to help them out by doubling it to 4 cents, or maybe even 5 cents? Realistically, it wouldn't affect the price of the cup of coffee. Of course, the average farmer would be miles more happy by having the salary increased so that they can have a better standard of living and give their family the basic needs, or maybe a little something extra to splurge on, or even be able to save a little extra when they make that much. These coffee bean caregivers are what keep your mug full of the great liquid that is coffee. So do you think that they deserve a little more than they're currently earning? Should they be paid for the actual value that they bring to Starbucks so that possibly one day even they can be able to afford that $5 cup only made possible by them?